I'm not dead.
I'm back.
And I'm here to say that Nier Automata is absolutely beautiful. Now, when I say beautiful, I don't mean graphically, nor am I referring to this game's extremely, brow-wiping, featured main character. No. I'm talking about that weird kind of beauty. The kind that makes you feel things. Nier Automata covers a lot of topics that are near and dear to my heart, because these topics are the same kind of things that I myself genuinely try to comprehend in my everyday life as of late. What are my goals and aspirations? Can I really make my dreams come true? Is there any real point to me making this video when so many other people have already discussed Nier Automata to death? And I know some of you are listening to this right now and probably thinking something like, "Oh, Dean, you just worry too much. You're just going through another existential crisis brought on by the feared inadequacy and the hostile nihilistic environment of the internet." And to that I'd say, yeah. But enough talk about my crippling depression. I'm here to talk about video games. So, let me begin by explaining the thing that I know best. Gameplay. And oh my gosh, this is gonna be a doozy, because Nier Automata has got to have one of the most ridiculous genre-melding combat systems I have ever gotten my hands on. I had a lot of problems with the first Nier, namely in its atrociously slow and clunky combat system, which is primarily what kept me from progressing past the game's first boss. So, when I heard that Platinum Games was going to be developing the next game in the Nier franchise, not only was I suddenly interested, but I was also really excited. In my opinion, Platinum Games have set the leading standard for fast-paced third-person action games. I feel like pretty much every game they've made, yeah, even that one, have all been pretty good, even if they just heavily borrow popular mechanics from their more original titles. This means that Nier Automata is both faster, more fluid, and just downright better to play in comparison to the last one. Over the course of the game, you play as 3 different characters: Rei, Asuka, and wait, no, that's the wrong series. When you play as 2B or A2, the game functions very similar to your typical Platinum action game. You got light attacks, heavy attacks, charge attacks, aerial attacks, dodges, the whole 9 yards. The game also has a fantastic feeling of movement, allowing the player to double jump, glide, grab ledges, and just a load of other ways to constantly stay airborne that I never even figured out how to do until my second playthrough. Regarding the different types of weapons that each character can use, there's about 4 different categories in total. These include small swords, large swords, spears, and fist weapons. Now, all the weapons in each 4 of these categories do look different, but they all do use the exact same set of animations dependent upon which category of weapon you're using. When fully upgraded though, all of these weapons have a unique set of abilities like lifesteal or higher stun chance. Depending on which slot you equip these weapons in and how much you have them upgraded, they will perform a different and longer chain of attacks. So when you put them in slot 1, they'll do fast attacks, and if you put the same weapon in slot 2, it'll perform slower, heavy attacks. When you directly compare Nier Automata's combat to, say, Bayonetta's, I'd say that it's still really good, but there definitely aren't as many combos as there were in Bayonetta. Bayonetta had this huge list of combos that you could pull off that required chaining the right presses of both the square and triangle button in the right order, and all of those combos changed depending on which weapons you had equipped in your arms and legs. But when it comes down to it, I honestly have no problem with this being gone and simplified in Nier Automata, because most of the time I was just spamming square and triangle rapidly, or just sticking to one particular combo that I could remember after I was practicing it in the loading screen. That's not to say that Nier Automata's combat isn't as deep as Bayonetta's, just different. Instead of having that massive list of combos, the game lets you customize how you want to play through a multitude of different RPG-like systems. These include the pods you can use, the programs you can equip them with, and the different plug-in chips you have to install. Pods act as the ranged weapons for all the playable characters in the game. You start the game with only 1 pod, and you can get 2 more during one of your many playthroughs. Pod A, the pod you start out with, is a Gatling gun. It fires a lot of bullets really fast. Pod C, which you find in the desert, allows you to lock onto enemies and blast them with missiles. I imagine that this is the pod that a lot of other players managed to find first, because oh god, that ringing sound in the desert is ear-piercing, how could you miss it? Pod B, on the other hand, is found by fishing it out of the water in the flooded zone. When I first found this pod, I was surprised. I was starting to wonder if there was ever going to be a Pod B, and I found it by fishing! Honestly, I don't know why it is that I'm just able to find that stuff. What?
Whoa. Is this a pod?
Wow! Anyway, this pod is probably the best of the 3 because it fires a laser beam that damages anything it touches, with no need to actually track enemies like the previous 2 pods did. Something that might surprise someone that has even beaten this game is that upgrading these pods gives them new abilities. I say that this is surprising because I feel that the game never actually managed to give me the required materials to upgrade these pods while I was playing through the main story. I had to go out of my way to get the materials required to upgrade all these pods, which at the end of the day was so worth it, because now Pod B can charge up and unleash a spray of pellets that just ricochet off walls and damage enemies. Each pod also has a program that you can equip them with, which allow these pods to perform powerful abilities that require a cooldown after you use them. The cooldown time depends on the ability in question and how much you charge up the ability before using it. The amount of time you're even able to charge up these abilities depends on how many pods you've unlocked, meaning that the maximum charge amount goes all the way up to 3 pods total. For example, using the laser program will shoot a single beam with a short cooldown, but if you charge it up by holding down the button, all 3 pods will then fire a laser beam and deal 3 times the damage. Every single pod program works like this, and there's over 17 of them in the game, which allows for a huge amount of customization for anyone's individual playstyle. Although I personally just tended to use Mirage and Hammer for a majority of all my playthroughs. And finally, there are plugin chips. These chips allow you to customize specific statistics like your total health, your critical chance, and evade distance by increasing them by percentile amounts. Additionally, some of them give you abilities like adding ranged shockwaves to your melee attacks, or slowing down time after a perfect dodge, aka witch time, or automatically picking up items upon walking next to them, instead of having to individually pick up every single item that any enemy ever drops. That chip is practically essential to equip, just for the sake of its convenience. In order to equip chips, you have to install them, but you only have a limited amount of storage space to work with, so you can only equip a set amount of chips at one time. This can be slowly increased by purchasing additional storage for your plugin chips over the course of the game. Plugin chips themselves can also be upgraded to give increased variations of their statistics, capping out at +8. Now that covers all the mechanics regarding 2B and A2's playstyle, but 9S has a completely different combat style, and dare I say you're almost playing a completely different game when you take control of 9S in your second playthrough. See, instead of performing a heavy attack when you press triangle, 9S performs a ranged attack that allows him to hack into enemies, which turns the game into a twin-stick shooter. When I first discovered that 9S had this ability, I was totally taken aback because it makes playing 9S a completely different experience from 2B or A2. Not only do you see things from a different perspective, but you're also playing them from a different perspective as well. It's really hard to concretely define what kind of genre Nier Automata really is after you get to this point in the game, because the genres change so rapidly in and out of combat. And I haven't even mentioned the amount of times the game's camera switches perspective. Generally, the camera will stay behind the character you're playing as, but there are certain sections where the game turns into a 2.5D perspective, like something out of a side-scrolling Metroidvania. The game's camera will just zoom in and out to show the game from all these different angles and completely change the control scheme to suit that scenario. But then the game transforms and changes genre again when you pilot a flight unit. Suddenly, you feel like you're playing Einhinder or one of the many Toho games, because these flight sections are structured like a bullet hell. Nier Automata is absolutely bonkers in that it has the most insane mash of genres I have ever seen thrown together in a game, and they're all just executed incredibly well. And all this absurd gameplay is complemented perfectly by the game's soundtrack. Whether you're running through the game's beautiful open world, fighting one of the game's many over-the-top bosses, or just taking in the scenery around you in the middle of doing a side quest, the game's soundtrack is just wonderful. This game also does something really interesting with its music in the overworld after you progress through certain points in the main story, and even after completing specific side quests. There's a specific side quest that will completely change the music that plays in the city ruins to a more dark and moody theme to set the tone of the discovery you've just made.
Type E. I didn't know there was such a thing. Did you 2B?
Some things are better left unknown.
A lot of the emotional impact of these side quests comes from the music that accompanies them, but the dialogue and quests themselves are also interesting in their own regard. A majority of all these quests do still follow that standard template of fetch here, kill objective here, but the story behind all of them are what makes them great. I think the main reason a lot of these side quests are still so good and interesting in comparison to the main story isn't necessarily just because they were all written well, but because the characters that you interact with have reasonable and almost relatable problems. And in most cases, that can sound kind of trivial when you compare it directly to some of the side quests you see in other RPGs. But the thing that makes it feel different is the fact that you're told to believe that these robots you're helping are just killing machines with no intellect. But yet, they act like normal people with real tangible problems. You're tasked with escorting a robot with the personality of a little girl back home. You need to help a mother get her child back from danger. You need to help this stupid neat robot come out of his bedroom and enjoy his life. Oh wait. This robot is having an existential crisis, and he ends up doing what most mentally unstable people end up doing in that situation. Commit suicide. Fuck. He's a robot from a fictional world set thousands of years in the future. But man, you feel him. I just got him, man. Just after a couple of lines of dialogue. Playing through specific parts of this game just made me experience a weird catharsis of emotions. It was weird seeing a game dev comment about his own existential dread in the video game you're playing. It just shows that no matter how far into the future you go, and no matter how much humanity has changed and evolved by that time, people still question things. No one has all the answers, and that fact alone can still drive people to depression. It's sad. Really sad. This entire game is just depressing as a whole, because when you break it down, nothing has really changed over the course of 1,000 years. People are still fighting wars with each other, and they don't even know why sometimes. With that being said, let me actually talk about this game's main story. And if you haven't played Nier Automata yet, well then go play the game, you dingus. I'm not gonna sit here and explain the whole story to you. If I did, this video would be over an hour long, because goddamn, this game can get confusing if you don't have context. Okay, so to begin with, I came in with the general understanding that this game is based off of ending E of the Drakengard series, so I knew right off the bat there were going to be multiple ending routes in the same vein that that series had. What I didn't know was how much that this game ties into Nier 1's story, because I never beat it. I didn't really understand androids and replicants, nor did I understand the significance of Emil being in this game, and I thought the Gestalt project was the merging of human consciousness into an android. So, you've got 5 different main endings for this game, separated by their respective routes and then 21 other joke endings, but I'm not really going to focus on those. Route A has you playing as 2B, and to be honest, not really many relevant things happen in this playthrough. You run around, get a feel for the open world, you meet some Bible references, you kill some Bible references, and then Route A ends. The game gives you a heads up that there are multiple endings to discover, so I'm thinking, okay, this is where things are going to start to deviate and get a little weird. Thing is that doesn't really happen, as there aren't really any legitimate differences from the plot of Route A. Route B only changes the perspective from which you view the events of Route A. But you do learn 2 very important details from this route. 1, 9S wants to fuck 2B.
What?
And 2, the Council of Humanity, and therefore humans as a whole, have been extinct for thousands of years. This little detail is revealed to 9S by the commander after 9S is saved by 2B during the fight with Adam. All that remains of humanity is a little bit of their genome, or DNA, situated on some moon base. But there's also a smaller detail that may be overlooked or just leave players confused at this point in the story. 2 holograms that weren't there in the previous route now stand behind 9S and 2B in the final cutscene. And these aren't the only times you see them in Route B. You see one when you're leaving the bunker as 9S, and another when you first encounter Adam and Eve.
Whoa, there was like another person right there.
These holograms play a much more important role in Route C when things really start to get interesting. So, after I beat Route B, I had a pretty good idea of how this story was going to progress. I was sitting there thinking, alright, I've played through this game twice, I've seen the story from the perspective of 2B and 9S, I don't know any other characters that are as relevant as A2, the operators, Adam and Steve, or the commander. I knew I had to play as one of them, and I had my money on A2 or the Gay Boys. But then, this happens.
Remember your pain. The pain of having your homeland stolen. We will never give up our struggle.
What?
We will take back the seas, the skies, the land.
This was the last thing I expected to happen, because instead of replaying the story yet again from another perspective, it continues. It blew my fucking mind, dude. Taro set this game up perfectly to misguide you into believing that you just kept playing through the same story over and over, learning only the slightest details on each playthrough, only to mindfuck you in the last section of the final playthrough. But no, dude, this halfway point right here, this is where the true mindfuck begins. The game explicitly tells you a set of conditions it's gonna follow, and then breaks them right after you beat the next chapter. It's perfect! And the roller coaster ride only gets crazier from this point out. During the operation to retake Earth, every Yorha unit on the ground gets infected with a logic virus, turning them crazy. 2B and 9S self-destruct, wake up back in the bunker, but then everyone in the bunker goes crazy. They try to escape and get back to Earth with the commander, but then she's infected. So then the bunker self-destructs, leaving only 2B and 9S as the only remaining members of Yorha not infected. And then this happens!
2B! Are you?
2B is killed by A2. But see, at the time of me watching this, I definitely knew that there was far more going on here than how 9S simply interpreted it as a murder. Before 2B is killed by A2, she says,
These are my memories. Take care of everyone for me. Take care of the future, A2.
I immediately assumed that this means that 2B isn't technically dead. She's just transferred her memories, and by possibility, a part of her consciousness into A2. Right after A2 kills 2B, A2 cuts off her hair to match 2B's. I was pretty convinced at this point in time, A2 and 2B had essentially merged together inside of A2's body. But after the first boss fight in Chapter C, when A2 is inside her own memory bank, 2B starts talking to A2. This proves that 2B, to an extent, is living inside of A2's memory banks. Whether 2B is consciously saying these things to A2, or if this is just a fragmented memory being recalled at the right time, is debatable. I wanted to believe that A2 and 2B's consciousness had somehow merged at this point, but in retrospect, I think it's more than likely that A2 has simply retained all of 2B's memories inside of her own. Now, the next revelation comes in the form of a text log labeled Black Box. Each Yorha unit is equipped with a black box, an item created by reusing the core of a machine life form. Mind blown!
The Yorha black box circuitry. It's made from cores from the machines? No, that can't be true.
Machines and androids are one and the same, but it still goes much deeper than that. Okay, now, in order for me to explain what I'm about to, I need to go back to the very beginning of the game. So, remember when the aliens invaded Earth, and then humanity or Emil fought them back, and they escaped to the moon? Yeah, that didn't happen. It's a lie. But I'd go so far as to say that there's a possibility that the alien corpses you see in the underground ship may not even be real corpses. They may be a fabrication created by the machine network to perpetrate the idea that there was an invasion, because after the total failure of Project Gestalt, androids may have just went crazy from failing their purpose to preserve humanity.
Thanks a lot, Kym and Angelus.
But anyway, without an enemy to fight, the machines eventually turned on their creators. But after they were gone, the machines had no one left to defeat. Their code dictated that in order to defeat an enemy, there must be an enemy to defeat in the first place. So, they created an enemy, and that enemy was Yorha. The machine network used Project Yorha to perpetuate an infinite cycle of war. The tower wasn't created at the beginning of Route C to destroy what remained of the human genome on the moon base, because that remaining human genome never existed to begin with. The tower rises up at the end of every cycle after enough data has been collected by the machine network and the current bunker has been destroyed to fire a new bunker into orbit to thus reset the Yorha project and begin anew. I think the cherry on top of this cake of revelations is in the final document the player receives after fully completing Ending C. A majority of the information I've presented thus far about my interpretation of the game's story is extrapolated from this document, and many other pieces of information within the game's subtext. Basically, the machine network formed a collective consciousness known as N2. As N2 grew and evolved, it incorporated information about humanity into itself, and thus became more human over time until it apexed. This is why, despite being based off supposed alien life forms, machines, and therefore androids, have personalities based around human tendencies. So, for all intents and purposes, machines are humans. A2's relevance to all this is interesting because, after realizing this, her motives for wanting to destroy the tower become all the more apparent. A2 was of course part of the first wave of Yorha units that were sent down in a doomed assault against the machines, but where all of her friends died, she survived. Somehow, she learns the truth of Project Yorha and vows to destroy it once and for all. After the final battle with 9S, A2 says,
I'm coming, everyone. I'm coming.
She is more than likely referring to all of the comrades that she was close with and in turn lost during her assault, an unspecified number of years ago. Her destroying the tower is a final act of revenge against the machines that created them, and in doing so, finally ends the endless cycle of war. But what about Route D? Well, in this ending, both 9S and A2 die impaled on each other's swords, and 9S either has the choice to join Adam and Eve in the stars, or stay behind and die. Regardless of which option you choose, a new bunker is fired into orbit, and the cycle continues. Which brings me to ending E. The ending that I imagine a lot of people consider to be the true and canon ending. See, the interesting thing about ending E is that regardless of which character you choose to play as in the final encounter, both of them let you choose and partake in this ending. It doesn't take place after ending C or D, because E isn't the story's canon ending. It's the game's end, the end of Yorha. This ending essentially breaks the fourth wall by letting you fight the goddamn credit scene, and then acknowledge you, the player, as a character.
But when we six were connected and exchanged information, something happened.
Pod 042 says the six of us, 2B, 9S, A2, Pod 042, Pod 053, and you, all of you together, exchanged information to each other by playing the game. I don't want to say that any ending is the canon one,
Until a sequel comes out.
because that's not what ending E is trying to tell you. Ending E is trying to tell you that just like life, it's not about the end. It's about the journey, the struggle, the time you and every other player who helped you along the way spent playing the game. You did it! You beat the game! Congratulations! Thank you for playing! I spent so long just trying to decide what to put for any new player who happens to reach this point.
But, I didn't delete my save because, I want to do that DLC later.
And, I just gotta say, I like these costumes, I like these hairdos, but man, it's a little overpriced for what you get. So, fuck you, Platinum.
Just kidding, I love you.
Now, there's a couple of other things I wanted to talk about, like how 2B's personality is actually based off of A2's, or how the celestial writing you see on the resource units also appears when you use pod programs, because that same celestial writing also appears in Nier 1 and Drakengard. So then that begs the question, what are the pods? Are they angels? Watchers? What about the weapon descriptions? What about the videos that play during certain sections with 9S? What the hell is the deal with Adam's tattoos? Does the logic virus's red eye glow mean that the Watchers still somehow exert control over the machines in this universe? See what I mean? I could just ramble on about nonsense regarding this game for who knows how long. So, I'm done. That's it. That's all I gotta say. Wait a minute. I did it! Oh my god! I finished the video! Well, I guess thank you for watching this far. Like, oh my gosh. I just can't believe I finally made a video after 8 months. I didn't mean for it to take this long, and I wanted to make other videos, but, I mean, I gotta thank the people who've been, like, giving me, like, money on Patreon. And thank you. Hottie and Adam Kenton. I couldn't have played these games without you. I'm gonna make more videos.